Good day, everybody. I'm Shmi, and today I'm back to talk about my initial reaction to last Epoch Cycle 1.1 Harbingers of Ruin, and I am absolutely loving it. There are so many amazing changes the devs made that have smoothed out the gameplay, added a ton of build diversity, and created a new mechanic that allows you to slowly work towards your late game build throughout the campaign. They also did a whole bunch of small quality of life changes, but there's three big things I want to talk about. So the first thing is the big change to the boss health bar, because there are a lot of people who honestly seem pretty grumpy about it, because it slowed down boss combat just a little bit. If you don't know, when you're fighting any boss monster now, anytime they enter a new phase, they get a full bar of, I guess we'll call it boss ward, like a shield. Now, the reason people are pretty grumpy about it is because it's a lot harder to burn down bosses so quickly that you can skip entire phases. It's basically harder to break the game now. Really, if you've ever played an RPG, I know there were a lot of JRPGs that did this. They had the stacked health bars where there's one boss health bar and then a number that tells you how many times that you have to go through it. That's basically how boss combat in Last Epoch feels now. It doesn't quite look that way, but that's how it feels. This boss ward smooths out the transition between phases, but it does so in a way that doesn't punish properly built high DPS builds. If you can sustain yourself with leech, regen, whatever, then the ward doesn't really mean anything. It makes the fight more authentic and gives the boss an actual chance to fight back. The only builds that got punished are unsustainable glass cannons that rely on mechanically breaking boss fights. The slower and more honest feel of Last Epoch's combat is one of my favorite parts about the game, and in my opinion, it just got even better. Second, I'm going to go ahead and toss up a little bit of a woohoo I was right compilation for a bit, because I have been obliterating everything with Disintegrate and Flamethrower Fireball. I also previously tried out Elemental Nova spec'd into Luminaire, the channeling spec, and that was good, but to be honest, it pretty quickly got outclassed as soon as I unlocked Disintegrate. All three of the mage channeling skills are not only viable now as build-around skills, but they're pretty dang good. Elemental Nova did feel the weakest out of the three, but it's still very comfortable as a skill. It's just a very specific skill to use. There's a lot of potential with it, but with my experience, it only really functions well for pack clearing. The damage is solid. It's not great, but pretty good. The radius of your Nova gets just stupidly huge, but no matter what, your damage per mana on Luminaire E Nova is outshined by Disintegrate or Flamethrower Fireball. You'll match Disintegrate's damage for 3 times as much mana, and you'll match Flamethrower Fireball's mana use for a quarter the damage, if that. The way that I'm playing my build, it's more of a big mana regen build than a big mana build, and so lower mana efficiency effectively means lower damage for me. I think there are builds out there that could take advantage of the ridiculous area clear speed that Luminaire E-Nova gives, but my build doesn't. So I dropped it pretty quickly for Disintegrate. This spell does so much damage. And when I started using it, the build that I was trying to use it with was just all wrong. I was trying to push Ignite when, honestly, Disintegrate, even when you specialize into it, is a pretty terrible Ignite applier. That might change with a couple of high-level uniques, but I expect if you're doing an Ignite build, you're always going to want Flamethrower Fireball instead. However, Disintegrate does a metric ton of spell damage, and of the 3 channeling skills, it is easily the most mana efficient. You barely need any increased mana regen to sustain Disintegrate, and I haven't even tested out the upgraded tier 2 and 3 Disintegrate beams, but I'm running around melting faces anyway. Just know that if you want to plan a Disintegrate build, which is now 100% viable, it's best done as a spell damage build, not an ailment build. And now we get to talk about my favorite of the 3 channeling skills, the one that I'm definitely going to keep in the final build for this character, Flamethrower Fireball. I'm nowhere near finished with the build. I ended up crashing last night after I beat the campaign, and just look at how much Ignite I can already stack. I'm taking 7 fireballs per second to just that means I get 7 applications of my Ignite per second against bosses. The DPS that you can pump out of the Ignites with this skill is just crazy. And on top of that, there's a few different ways you can spec Fireball so that you can do this but push it more into working for area clear instead. It is a massive mana hog though. So be sure to add increased mana regeneration to your loot filter because you're definitely going to need it. And I think that's the thing that I've loved the most about testing these changes to the mage channeling spells. None of them were easy. You had to try. The devs didn't just make it overpowered, easy, thoughtless, put the skill on and melt everything. Like, yes, you can push out some crazy damage, but if you don't build and gear your character properly, you're going to spend a lot of time running around like a doofus waiting to regenerate mana and doing 0 damage. With this channeling regeneration change, you can now deliberately push your ability to embrace that overwhelming power and channel magic directly through you, but only if you do it deliberately and know what you're doing. The last thing I want to talk about here in this video is the Harbinger mechanic itself, and that's because I actually kind of hated it at first, but I've come to realize that I really like it. I ran into my first Harbinger my first Harbinger early on around level 8, and I was immediately offered a unique and 3 rares at level 8. Even more insane is that from what I saw, the pool of uniques that the Harbingers tend to offer during the campaign seems to skew toward leveling uniques. So I was just sitting there thinking, oh, alright, cool, just give us everything for free if we get lucky, I guess? But I pretty quickly came to realize that most of those uniques are not great beyond the early game. You're stuck with like a level 5 weapon. They're only broken once you've fused them together in the Temporal Sanctum. So it's not that it really gives you free loot, but it lets you actually target farm by banishing the stuff you don't want and build up your character by finding necessary mechanic enabling unique items. Instead of having to just power farm necessary uniques when you get to the monolith and waiting to get lucky, the Harbinger mechanic now gives each player some predictable access to work on their exact desired endgame build starting in Act 1. As for me, I've been loving Harbingers of Ruin. I'm up feeling great today. I'm ready for a day of monolithery, so I'll let you guys all know what I can find out about these channeling skills, including at least 2 builds on this. This Ignite Flamethrower is definitely going to be one, and there's another one that I think Lightning Disintegrate is actually going to be better. I'm also, before I get back to playing, I'm going to try to put up a second video today about the month off that I took and what I got up to. So thank you all for watching, and until next time, take care, y'all.